Welcome to Paranormal Experienced radio on Dark Realm TV, app on Roku, Amazon, Fire TV. And this is Mark Elliott Fults, the Fat Psychic. And I welcome you to our show tonight. Kat is busy being a good Samaritan and babysitting. And I am here babysitting y'all. Aren't y'all lucky? And and I'm lucky. So we're going to try and have a lot of fun. And what I'm going to do tonight, I hope everyone's had a good day. Relax, get into the groove. And we are going to talk some metaphysical stuff that I do. I do table tipping and things like that. And I'm a psychic, and I've been working in the psychic field 45 years. I've been a psychic since I fell out of my mama's easy bake oven at the Kmart 64 years ago. But I have been psychic my whole life. My mother's mother was incredibly psychic. And I found out a few years ago that I have a great grandmother who lived in the 1890s, 1880s, and was a spiritualist. And she made her living being a psychic and being a spiritualist because her husband came in one day when he was 50 and said, "I'm retired, figure it out." So she started making a living doing what everyone did back then, which was, doing the readings and the table tippings and all the spiritualists. It was a woman's movement. And I am a modern psychic and a modern metaphysician. And I had training. I was a third degree Wiccan of many moons ago, 35, 36 years ago. And that was a good training field for me. But on my own, I have expanded and like anyone else, you learn, you grow, you develop into your own self, and we were always taught, don't follow, lead yourself. Don't become a follower. You follow when you're learning, but once you learn, lead yourself, and we were taught to be very dedicated to what, if we're going to do it good. If you're not going to do it good, don't do it. Just don't try. And fight, until you're ready to really commit to it. And because this, the paranormal field, the metaphysical field, which they are different in a way, because there's a lot of people in the paranormal field that have very little experience with the metaphysical in the paranormal. And the way that I look at metaphysics for me is, I've had a very weird experience in my life. I've had quite a few little traumas that have enhanced my abilities. And unfortunately, every time, I've had several very dramatic things happen, but, the very good thing out of it is something good came out of it. So I can't whine and moan too much about it. It's, I was murdered. Well, or we'll say unalived. I'm sorry. Unalived. 34 years ago in a random act of violence. And that experience, the near-death experience, when that began, that was so wonderful that it changed everything for me, of course. But then I had to come back. And I did that twice. And it deepened and opened. It, because I had been, when I was being attacked, I was 118 pounds. I'm 6'2" at that time. I'm shrunk now. And getting hit so many times in the head, because I was stomped by three guys that were 175 pounds apiece for 15 minutes because they wanted to see someone die. And everybody was gathered around watching that. And it was kind of like entertainment. And I got hit so many times. Well, what it does is when you, especially if you get head injuries and things like that, it will, your third eye has, your pineal gland has magnetite in it. So it will do something with the magnetite, and your body overcompensates. And if you're lucky, your third eye opens up more. And actually, I've had quite a few head hits in my life, so it's opened it up kind of a little more than what I would have expected. And then 2 weeks ago, I was coming home from a paranormal event in Tennessee, Red Rolling Springs, and a drunk ran me off the road. My van flipped 3 times, and I got out of it unscathed. But the turning upside down, uh, again, it did something to the third eye. It does something to your chemistry. It does something to your aura. So dramatic and traumatic things that happen to you can deepen your skills. If you're lucky, if this is the field you're in, because if not, then you just went through something hideous and then you have to try and live through it. And I've been very lucky to live through quite a few things that, a lot of people just, it's a little foreign to them to understand that it happens. But then again, some of it is destiny. It happens to make you more. And so, but as a metaphysician, you got to know your stuff. As a psychic, you got to know your stuff. I do readings, I do seancing, I do table tipping, I do all of these things. And channeling is my favorite. So tonight we're going to talk about channeling and table tipping and things like that. And I just went through a few months ago. I did a very dramatic. It was the first time I had done a table tipping in public, and I was asked to do it at the Night House. And Eric Sims and Roger Sims, they own the Night House, and I came there and I did the table tipping. They wanted to do that, and so I made a special table for it, and I went, and it was so exciting in a different way than I expected, because when you are a metaphysician, before I get into all of what happens with table tipping and all that, when you're a metaphysician, you got to know yourself. You are your tool. You have to understand the mechanisms, the third eye, the aura, what is the spirit contained within this body that it's being built in, what runs it, what feeds it, and when that person passes, the spirit, because the body is a spirit delivery system, it's what the spirit is in. So when the spirit delivery system falls to the wayside, how is the spirit functioning? How is it? Because that energy, of course, science says energy does not die, it just forms. So not a lot of people know what it transforms into and where does it go. What, there are different many levels and layers and dimensions, and you just, you kind of got to do your own work. But there's a lot of it that I have found through that I've learned through osmosis, that I've learned from being uh, basically thrown into the water. And I learned so much through experience. And you make mistakes when you're young and you learn. And by the time you get to be an old codger like me, then, you learn your procedures. You learn how to control your energy. You learn how to activate your aura, because your aura is a CAT scan and you have to be protected and you have to have it all functioning. And so anything that I do under a lot of spiritual development and protection. I am very disciplined in that. When I went to do the table tipping, I channeled for a month before I went. So, and what that means is I, in a safe, contained aura, opened up my skills for a month. So I was channeling. So by the time I got there, boom, it was already open. I was ready to deal. But you have to learn, a lot of people are empaths and they can feel things, but they can't necessarily understand what's being said or done or what they're experiencing. And I'm very lucky that I, at this age, am able to, my system is so functional that what happens is your CAT scan will read what's in front of you. And then it will tell you if it's good, something you should deal with, not. And if it's something that, there's a lot of things that are happening now that people are doing, that when you go into these situations and you're called in as a ghost hunter or whatever, a psychic, a lot of it, it's so much information, you have to process it. And sometimes you can't process it enough until you get out. It's like going into the static radio. It's like you're going into this field of static material, and your system is trying to figure it out without letting you get infected or without taking it on. And then once you're out of it, then it'll process what it is if it's too overwhelming. So in psychics, it's very hard to be a psychic, but it's also the most incredible journey. I've had such an incredible time myself, and it's everything that I wanted to be. The experiences are great. Now, dealing with people is a whole different thing. And people really love the idea of psychics, and they really do. But people don't know how to treat psychics. And a lot of times they try to take the information you give them and use it as their own, or they don't want to give credit to the psychic, but they want to use the psychic. So that's, things that I'm having to deal with right now, which is from now on, I'm going to start dealing with Mark. I'm going to create my own things, and I will have small groups of people that I trust, and I will not be dealing with the politics of ghost hunters per se that I've had to deal with. Now, there's been some wonderful experiences with ghost hunters, and then there's been some not so great. So, but I'm quite a trained energy technician, and and I'm very open towards people. Spirits are. I have no problem dealing with spirits. Spirits are actually easy peasy. People are the difficult thing because they're in a meat pie where you have all this to hide in, and they hide. A lot of times, people have ulterior motives. And when I come to the game, I'm always I still kind of childlike for some reason, and I'm like, I'll bring the coloring book, you bring the crayons. We're gonna have fun, and I do my best and do work, but that's not necessarily how people are. And so, but I don't want people to ruin my experience, and I don't want so um, I want to make sure that I have to start doing things the way I feel like they need done, because I don't allow things like alcohol and or drug use or anything before an investigation. It's a no, because then you're lowering your protective system and opening yourself to things. I don't allow things like, and when I get around, and I'm an old poof, okay, and but when you get around into a lot of straight male ghost hunters, they always go into sexual joking, and then it turns into other stuff. It gets really raunchy stuff. I've had to deal with that so many times, but since it wasn't my group, I couldn't say don't do that. And or if I did, that just caused a problem, because I would try to explain to people, when you are open to spirits and you inject sexual energy into the conversation, you're going to draw something of that. It magnetizes whatever you're doing, magnetizes that kind of energy. So you could be drawing something to you really don't want. So it's not a healthy thing. So moving forward, I don't, when I do things, after we're finished doing whatever investigations and things we're doing, you can go drink, you can go do whatever, you can go joke, you can go do that. But when you're dealing with spirits, it has to be ethical, and it has to be, if you want a high response with the spirits, you have to approach them with a high energy. You have to respect the conversation, and you have to also be able to assess, is that a spirit? Is that another energy? And is that, the go-to for a lot of people is, the D word. Well, not everything's that, very rarely, but I can say I have had to have an experience where I found a factory of that kind of crap. But for the most part, there are some of those things, but they're very rare. There are a lot of energies that are malignant that you don't necessarily want in your house or in your home or around your children and things like that. So you have to always start off with protections and being wise enough to understand, you don't really, if you can't see it, you don't know what it is. And um and a lot of ghost hunters think they know what they're looking at when they can't see it, and they think they know how to deal with it. And then when they get approached by something that they don't know how to deal with, they freak. And so if you're going to do metaphysical experiments and things like that, in the process of doing paranormal, going to a ghost house and speaking on the squawk boxes to the ghost. Well, when you're calling a ghost and talking to a ghost, some people do pretty good and they do communicate with the spirits. But when you're doing that, you're opening up a line of communication. And And the thing I'm finding out is a lot of people do this stuff, but they really don't believe it's true. So then they want it to be true, but they're not really sure. And then when something happens, they scream and run. Well, you have to, but they're not doing it with doing protection. I've had quite a few ghost hunters go, I don't need protection. Protected. Stick their hand. But if you go into a nuclear plant and don't have the equipment on and stick your hand into a unseen radioactive material and then get affected because you didn't use protection, then it's no different. You're sticking your hands into something, you're opening the doors to things that if you use protection and procedure and understand how to keep your energy in working order, you can have a safe experience and then not have problems. But a lot of people go no protection. They don't know if their aura is in a working protection or situation. They go into these places, then go home and wonder why they've got dead boyfriends follow them around for days, or there's something in their house, or um, they don't know how to tune out things, and that's been something in the last few years I've really worked on, is finding out how to explain to people how to do their auras, how to tune out this stuff. And if you're hearing something, how to tune it out so you don't get driven crazy by it. Because I know people who get worn down by things like that because they don't know how to make it go away or shut up, or, and it's like they don't have control of their own body. And so how can they, if you don't have control of your energy, then it's hard to push something away from you if it has found a way to infect your energy. So I'm working on a book called The Psychic Worm Stitch, where I'll tell all of that, how to do the meditations before you go. And even if you think you're strong enough and don't need protection, you're talking about an energy. You're talking about an energy that sees you as an energy source. So that means it could see you as food, not just talking to you. It could see you as food. And if you're not taking precautions and you just get out there and you do it, or you drinking, you had a couple of bars before you went, you know, it could end ugly. It can be bad. But then again, if you take the precautions and understand, don't do things like that. Wait and party after. I'm against people having fun. What I am against is doing something that lowers your protective system, and or something that the vibe might bring something to you don't want, you know. So, but I'm going through all of that, I'm a very disciplined metaphysician. After 45 years, I know pretty well how my body works and how my energy works. Now, the table tipping stuff, the spiritualist stuff that I'm doing, which was a rage. I mean, back in the 1800s, it was the rage from the middle 1800s up to about the First World War, and then the spiritualist movement almost became a huge religion, huge. And because there were churches that taught spiritualism, and people would get together and do seances. And in Chattanooga there was a place up on Lookout Mountain that the Natural Bridge, and the spiritualist church owned it, and they would have seances with thousands of people, and it was an incredible spot, and it was quite lovely, quite beautiful, and to them it was their spiritual, but they did it in a Christian spiritual manner, and they were doing it with the aspect of God. It was kind of a Christian movement, but it was more spiritualist, talking to spirits. And it became a threat. And so, other churches and stuff got together and chased them off with torches. And the spiritualist movement got tamped down. The biggest person that went after the spiritualism movement was Houdini. Because first of all, he was in it trying to see if he could talk to his mom and see if he could do it. And it didn't work out that way. So then he got mad and he went after them. And there were a lot of psychics who had wonderful talents. But and there were some that they really, they couldn't figure out. They never did really figure out them. But when the smear campaign went, there were people that allegedly, they had evidence planted against the really good ones to ruin them. There were plenty of charlatans, because anytime you deal with a thing of psychics, you always have to go with a grain of salt. I've had to work with psychics that I've sat and listened to people using tricks to do their readings. They'll question you in a way where you're giving them the information, and then they embroider a story. And I go into it always, don't tell me anything, don't tell me anything. Let me tell you what I see. And with psychics, there are plenty of really good ones. And then there are some that, they should be out flipping hamburgers instead. So you have to be able to decide if they're really hitting or not. And you try not to give them any information, and let them unfold and tell you. That's a sign of a good psychic. But now, see, right now I've been through a very hard couple of years, so I'm getting back on my feet, getting ready to begin everything that I'm beginning. And it's pretty exciting. But as you go out doing what you do, what I do is I do readings, I do channeling, and I do the table tippings and things like that. And I have incredible boards that I've created. But everything I've created through discipline and a controlled energy. And so when I do things in public with people, if you're going to touch anything I have on my tables, or touch my tipping table or my boards, or you're going to do something with me, you don't touch it unless I put you through a meditation. If you don't want to do the meditation, you're not going to be at the table, because I teach people how to protect themselves. And also, after it's over, their protective system is working. I can tell if their aura is up or not. If their aura is in not good enough working condition, we can do a little bit about that energy-wise to try and strengthen it. I'm not going to let someone be in something I'm doing without adequate protection. And then that way, after it's over, if you're having a problem, then we have to assess what the problem is, but it ain't going to be because your system wasn't protected. Now, because you can go into places and pick up stuff, but if you've got your protection going, it at least is separated from you. And it's easy to detach if there's something that, is pretty prickly or bad, uh, because there's a kind of a rise in that, because people are really dragging a lot of things into our level of dimensional living that shouldn't be here, you know, to scare people and to be entertained by it. So I don't suggest going to anything without doing, before you go, do a little protective thing, do your energy, get your energy cleansed. And then when you finish, you cleanse your energy again, and then you turn it down. And I'm very big about that. And when I went to the night house to do the table tipping and do the night of, it was 2 nights of seancing. I did everyone's readings. And when you do a reading, you don't have to do it, you go in and do the reading. But now I've got my system going, I've got all my protections in place, and I read them and I read what's going on. And then the next night we did board work and then table tipping. Now, when we did the board work, everyone who wanted to see the boards are, when I make my boards, I spend a week charging the board. I anoint it. I do energy work. When I draw the artwork, I charge the inks. I charge the paper. I hold the paper. I hold the piece of art. When I apply it to the board, then I hold the board about an hour a night for a week, and then when I seal it with energy and anoint it. So it reacts to my energy like boom. And if you want to go on the Night House website, I think they have the boards, the readings, and all of it. They live stream. I didn't know they were going to live stream it. And but before the board thing was, I told people, if you're going to touch the boards, you're going to go through a meditation. And these people, none of them had been through really anything like this before. And it was like, and they were not afraid. Now, I have to say, women are usually not afraid. Men are usually afraid of what I do, which is very interesting. But this group of people, they were in it. They were in for it. They were up for it. And a lot of them had never opened their energy and understood their energy. And I was connecting them to their energy, to their source and so these people, when it was time to do the boards, I said, well, who wants to do, and they were all at the table. And it was men and women. There were 2 men, and I think, and a lot of women. And it was such pure energy that I'll swear to you, it was like I went, all that's missing is the 1890s clothes. Because I thought, we're doing a spiritualist thing in the 1890s. Because these people were into it. They were listening. They were following directions. They weren't afraid. And if you're going to do something, don't be afraid. If you're afraid, don't do it. Really don't. And they were amazing. Those people were amazing. So we did the boards. And my boards, I couldn't find my favorite little planchette, which one thing the Ouija board company a few years ago they made a glow in the dark. You push it down, it lights up. I love that planchette, but I couldn't find mine. So I brought a big crystal from a gigantic chandelier, and it's about like this. And I put a black dot on it so we could see where it's going to point, 2 letters. And I said, now when we use this, because I'd used it before, you use the board but it goes very fast. And not only does it go fast, the crystal planchette was spinning underneath our fingers. And there were people who were, they would kind of get thrown off around the curb. But when they asked information, so it was great. We had a great time, and they were really up for it. And then we finished and there were things that were being asked that, boom, the people were able to acknowledge, the things I didn't know about. And I actually would take my fingers off the planchette and to show them that, it wasn't me directing it and pushing it. Now, what I did do is, because of the energy, I would direct the energy to keep the energy focused and keep it moving. Because because the way I do it, you turn up your aura, and everyone's auras were lit, and the energy was built, and it was great. So we were using the boards, and I mean, you want to talk about raised lightning? It was great. It was, and I have a whole system of boards that I designed through my friend Teal Gray. Had an experience in York, and these spirits tried to talk to her, and it scared her a little bit, and she was talking to me about it, and they connected with me, and they were like, we want a communication system. And so I made boards with full words, full meanings, full thoughts. Sometimes, some of the boards I have that I didn't use there, have it doesn't leave a lot to the imagination. And I have 4 categories of death, natural death, unnatural death, suicide, and whew, I mean, just a lot. So, but people using what I call my Deja board, they loved it. We had a great time. And then we moved on to the table tipping. Now, I will tell you, when I was young, I was always fascinated with table tipping. I think I remember there was a movie back, I think it was in 79, 80, and it's a fantastic movie. I think you can get it online. The Changeling. And I think it's George C. Scott is in it. And it was a kind of metaphysical movie. It was a ghost movie. It was a ghost story. But it's one of them that there are a lot of things that were first in it. The thing of where, the ball comes bouncing down the stairs, and houses exploding and stuff. It took the over the top stuff, but it also incorporated so much reality into it. They had a psychic in it, a medium, who came to the house to contact this spirit, this child spirit. And she did a spot on automatic writing. She was channeling, and they did it real. They did it as if it were real. It wasn't, and there were fine actors, And when you watch this movie, it was made, all that time ago, but it's timeless to me in a way. It's, if you're not looking real close at what people are wearing, it's timeless because it has a reality basis in it to where it's treated as real and serious. The people who did it treated it as real and serious. And it's scary as hell. And I loved it. And I went, when I saw that psychic, I could feel it in me. I felt it in my genes. I felt it in my DNA. I went, I have ancestors who've done that. And I went, I want to do that. So it became a challenge to me. I wanted to do it and do it well. And that's a really good movie. If you're a metaphysical person, watch The Changeling. Uh, it's very good, very scary, and it's very dramatic. I mean, you don't have in real life a lot of things that happen in the movie like that, but there is a core reality of what the psychic does and how the ghost reacts in a lot of ways that it was pretty good. And it came along not too long after the movie The Exorcist. I remember when The Exorcist came out. I was probably about 10 years old, and we used to go roller skating. And we were out there, and these little girls were had we went and saw The Exorcist, and I slept with the lights off for 2 weeks, and I thought, ooh. And when I saw The Exorcist when I was a teenager, it grossed me out. It didn't scare me, it grossed me out. Now, when I look at it, I go, there's a lot of reality. It was treated as real. And it had a grounding to it. But I remember people really freaking out when that movie came out. Of course, the subject matter of it, it's a little different. But and the subject matter of the ghost and the changeling, there's some things you can look at and go yes, and then there's some of it you can look at and go, well, that's a little, liberty, taken of liberty. But when you get into metaphysics, you have to be able to protect yourself from anything that's out there that's an energy source you don't want, thinking you look delectable, or dark energy. There's a lot of things that are dark that doesn't necessarily mean they're bad. They're just out of a material that's dark. And then there are dark materials that are part of, they're from, it's like in the woods, the forest, when the trees die and the leaves die and the animals die and the people die and they decay and they turn into oil and, they seep down, there are things that are like that people pull up into your level, into our dimensional level. And you got to be able to tell, is that good? Am I talking to some? And you talk to everything at an arm's length. So you don't get eaten, you don't get infected, you don't bring it home. You keep it arm's length. And so when we got to the table tipping subject of the night, I had everyone do their protective systems. I had everyone understanding, what we were doing. And when I was watching them do their meditations, you can see the light either come on or not, And if somebody is having a little bit of trouble, you can do things to help direct energy to help them with it. But not everybody's inclined to do that kind of thing. But if you're going to work in the metaphysical field or in the paranormal field, you need to be, you are your tool. And whether you believe it or not, you don't go in and stick your hand in it and without making sure. Because even if you don't believe in it, doesn't mean it ain't real, baby. And like I said before, if you go to a nuclear plant and stick your hand into radiation and then wonder why your hand's smelling off, because you didn't wear a glove, you didn't take precautions. So what's wrong with taking a precaution? And it's an ego thing. And you have to, when you deal with spirits, you kind of have to take the ego and put it at a side. Because so many people think they know it all and do it all and blah, blah. And it's like, for me, I know a lot. For me, And I know what's good for Mark and not good for Mark to do. And I know if somebody's working with me and how I'm going to protect them and protect myself. Um, I don't know it all. And I can tell you there ain't nobody out there that knows it all. Everyone can have degrees of understanding, but you have to understand we are an energy. And what you're dealing with could have been a living energy. It could be something that could be a thought form that somebody created through ritual or that just through action, or there are damaged spirits sometimes. There are wonderful spirits sometimes. There are amazing things out there. But if you're going to communicate, you have to look at yourself as a technician and your body as the tool. And we are made out of electromagnetic plasma. So we have to be able to keep that in order and make it work. And if you think of it in that way, think of things as energy, it works a lot better. Because I think when people approach things and they think, well, I'm going to approach this from a Catholic uh, avenue or a Christian avenue or whatever avenue, there are things out there that have they're not under the constraints of whatever your spiritual belief is. And so that's one thing with the Catholic exorcism. They don't like to do them. That's why they go, oh, you have to go through a bishop and you have to go do this. And, you go through a process. You have to um, know that if you approach things in only a spiritual way, if it doesn't adhere to what your constraints are, you can piss it off. And I've seen that happen. But if you look at everything as energy, then then you have a better understanding of how to make a barrier to push it out of your house, to get it away from your children, to get it away from your animals, so get it um, or to take a basic haunting and be able to cleanse your house and push the things out of your boundaries, make a new boundary, because it's all energy. But I have seen, and I have gone in. There was one that they had a bishop come in. They had people come in and try to cleanse a thing in Chattanooga. It was 30 years ago, at least. And they called me, and I went in and I did the boundaries, energy boundaries, and it worked. And so, there are some things that you can affect by spiritual constraints, but some you can't. And if you treat it as energy, then you have a better chance of getting it out of your system and out of the home and out of the environment. So now, when I go into a place, of course, this was the first time I'd done a big group table tipping. And I found an old 1940s card table, wooden cherry card table. It's beautiful. And it has a big square thing in the middle that was covered in fabric, but that was pretty bad. So I took all of that off and I painted the center board, and I did a circular design of, table tipping, what I consider a table tipping design. But I took old graveyard, tombstone symbols like winged skulls and things like that from the 1800s, 1700s, and made a circle of that painted in gold on a black background, because you're talking to the other side. You're talking to deceased energy. So I made the table. I charged it up. I blessed it. I got it all done. And so when it was time for the table tipping, I went into a big spiel like I'm having to give you, And table tipping It's not for everybody, but of course mine, because I'm a channeler. Now the reason mine is very intense is because I've been doing channeling a long time, and it was such a net. I wanted to do it ever since I was a child, basically. And there was an old witch I knew that he was a jerk and a half, but he knew his stuff. But we talked about table tipping, and I was probably 20, 21 years old. I'm 64 now. And we discussed it, and he goes, "It's really physics." And he tried to show me how to do it, but I wasn't, I was still a newbie. I was still a neophyte. So I wasn't quite ready for it then. But I got the concept. And when I do channeling and things like that, I speak to the spirits. I have my protective thing. I have a almost a Teflon coating of energy that goes down the shallow, which is your abdomen, and your solar plexus. That's where everything comes in and everything goes out. And I have a Teflon coating basically of energy that I've done for weeks before I ever do a channeling. And what a channeling is you can come to your system, but you hold it at arm's length. It can go, if it goes into your shallow, then you have a coating that is not in your energy, it's in that coating. And when you're finished, you go shoop, and it's like it's out of the system. If you have to channel it deeply, but if you don't, you talk to it from a distance, and you know, and 98% of it is done from a distance. But I know how to do the old school channeling safely. And if people go, well, how do you know? Blah, 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 blah. Well, just years and years, decades now of doing it. Uh, I've done so much protective work. By the time it's there, by the time it's finished, it's like it's going down a water slide. It comes in, it goes out, and it's gone. It don't stay. Now, if somebody opens themselves up to channel without protection, you've just taken that energy into your body, and you don't do that. You have to have the muscles working, you have to have the protection going so that you don't keep it, that you don't let it get into your fiber. And so channeling is not a simple thing. And there are some good channelers out there, but there are also some that, we used to know one in Chattanooga that, I don't want to say his name. I'm sure he's gone to heaven by now. But he would go, I am now going to channel, and I am now Elvis. I am now Yul Brenner. I am now Jesus Christ, which I was like, what? And then he'd go, I'm now Mother Murray, because he talked rough special. And then when he got to being Satan, he said, now I am now Satan. Now, this is how he would talk to women. He'd say, now, would you be upset if I asked you to go have a drink, as Satan? And he would hit on women during the channeling. And we were listening to a recording of it, and it was like, he didn't have messages, went, oh, I'm now Elvis. And a different kind of channeling. There were people who loved him, but he also would do all things to women that if I were a woman, I'd have punched him into his next life. I would have. But it was entertaining. But when you channel, I don't channel things like, Elvis and Marilyn. And I've seen a guy channel Marilyn that put the chills on me. And that's when I remember watching that. And you can find it online somewhere. This gentleman, Channel Maryland, James Daughtery or Jim Daughtery, her first Marilyn's first husband was there, and it was on a psychic show. And this man is sitting there, and you can see the spirit go underneath the skin, basically. And then he began talking to James and told James things that only he and Marilyn knew. So, and that was real. And then I've seen some, it's like, oh, I am, it gets well. So my channeling is very intense. Now I have channeled energies that are very strong, but very interesting. And the technique of doing it is I'm just such an old school person. My technique is very different. So, very primitive in a way, but it's something people haven't seen in a while, so it scares them because it's very energetic. But I do channeling. Now, when I do table tipping, the thing people don't get, you can do table tipping without having to channel spirits because it's physics. Now, when I was doing the table tipping at the Night House, which I think they have that video out, I was talking to the spirits behind here because you hear your spirits through your axon terminal. If you've ever seen the pictures of auras and halos from the Middle Ages, that's your axon terminal kind of energy that's here. That's where your guides and guardians come from, and it's at the back of your skull around the base of your skull, the cerebellum, and that's where all the old DNA information we have is. And from that, you have a stalk that goes up to your pineal gland, and then your pineal gland, your third eye is right, about here. So when you're talking to spirits, you're really talking to them, listening to them from behind you. So when I was doing the table tipping, I had the spirits, I was talking to them from behind me. And the table tipping itself, when it was time to do it, I was sitting there going, a few people want to do it because usually people are scared, to do things. And these people ran to that table and they had their hands on it and they were ready because we had just done the boards and they were primed. So what I did is I had them do their energy work. So the spirits, I'm talking and listening to the spirits behind me because it's a ghost thing. It's a ghost thing happening. We're in a house of ghosts, a ghost house attraction, which they have quite a bit of ghosts there. And I had the people there. They had their energy turned up. We had their auras. Each individual aura is going protected. So what then I do is that I did a protective thing around the people on the table to make a sphere of energy around those people and around myself. And I had them raise their energy from their aura here into their hands and drew their circles. And they had their circles, but I had them take the energy. They had their hands on the table, and I had them do the energy from the top of their head down their back underneath the table. So the table was encased in energy. And I had a sphere around which was a sphere of energy I directed about 6 feet above the table. That wide, as wide as you can put out your arms and height. And I had them do their energy under the table. They had their energy on the table. And I started them doing an energy in a clockwise manner. And it was, chanting, table up. So they had the energy. They were developing a sphere of energy around the table. Now, what that does, if you're old enough like me, you'll remember a game called air hockey. And you would have a table and they would have this, the little clackers going that you could hit like little hockey pieces and skit, but they were like hover. They were hovering. And that's kind of what you do. You're using your electromagnetic field to create a magnetic field around the table. But you're telling that table to lift up. So whether you even verbally understand it, your system is saying, we want that table. It's in a sphere of energy and it's being magnetized to go up. So it's like air hockey. So they're doing that and raising energy doing that. And they got into transit. And we were going like 1890s spiritualists, let me tell you. So then Roger, Eric's partner, that they own the house, I told him, had talked to them about using thermal imagery. And they were doing the thermal, looking at things. They got several things on film that were amazing. But they were looking through the camera and they saw me and they saw my eyes go white and they saw the light just coming out of my head. Well, that's because my third eye is ultra open because I've been hit in my head so many times. It is overbalanced and changed. So my third eye is very open more than the average bear. So my eyes were white. They were looking at. They didn't get that on film, but they saw it and told me about it. And I think that kind of weirded them out. But I'm an energy technician. And I told people, I said before we did this, I said, now I will channel and do this, but you need to wear a diaper because it's going to be intense. And I don't know what they were expecting, but I gave them the intense. But on top of them having that energy, cushioning that table, magnetizing that table and telling it up, up, I created what is called a cone of power, which is you take your energy, which I have the really open third eye. So I took energy and raised energy through channeling, and I did like a little triangle of energy over the table. And I had it going, and I directed it, and I directed their energy, and it just got intense. And because it was a big sphere of it could only go up to the top of the sphere. So it was contained within this sphere. Now, during that time, since it's a ghost investigation, I was talking to the spirits behind me. The spirits were not doing the table tipping. The spirits were behind me talking to me. And Eric was the questioner. I choose a questioner next time my next process I'm going to be doing Singe Raider, doing and that'll be a lot of fun because she's really, she's worked with me before and we know how it works. And she's not nervous about anything on it. So, she knows I'm going to make sure she's protected. So Eric is asking questions, and there are spirits there in their house. Now, see, I will be putting out videos of evidences I have for different places because I'm the fat psychic. And I have evidences for the night house. I was able to identify Jack, who is in the basement, who very vocal, basically the spokesperson, the energy of this house, which is way over 200 years old, and I believe. And there was all these different things. Dan, there were other spirits, and actually during it, I was telling him names, and he was able to. Eric knows the history that he was able to go look up, you know, who Nancy was. Nancy was one of the sisters of the people the Knights, who owned the house, and that. And there were things that there's plenty of stuff that I was throwing out that they knew. Um, Correlated, and it was stuff that I had no way of knowing. So that's the psychic wants to have that information out there, and when you can identify that it's correct, then the ghost hunter wants to have credit, and the psychic needs to have credit, because if you're a good psychic, you want people to know what you can do so that they know you can do it, and it helps the other psychics who are good, that are working hard, get a little further, because I do cold case work, and so many times you work your heart out on a case, and you give it to the police, and it goes in the garbage because you're a psychic, instead of going, well, all right, we'll look at this, or they use it and they find something out of it, but they aren't going to give you credit. So it's a very hard thing for psychics, so we have to start being a little bit more recognized. If we do a good job, we got to have the credit, and we got to be recognized. And other people want that. When they have their credit, they want that for them. So why not for the psychics? So, and it's not for a monetary thing. That is for a boom. Let's prove it. Boom. If you can prove it, have the proof. Boom. And I've got a book of proof. I've got my book of it. I'm going to be doing videos of the proofs I've got. But we were doing this tape, and the spirits were separate. We were raising the energy through the energy of the people, my energy, and I was directing it. And what happens when you I channel, but you can channel and not channel spirits. You can channel and just channel energy. But I was there to do both. But I can do it without doing the spirit thing. But I love to do it with the spirits. It's amazing. So we're raising the energy. And what happens is the energy gets to a certain pitch. And if you're a metaphysical person or a metaphysician, if you're raising, chanting, you get to a certain pitch and you raise the energy, and boom, you get to a certain level, and it kind of breaks the veil, or it splits the veil a little bit. The veil is like electromagnetic plasma rice. It's like vibrating little grains of rice. And when you put frequency on it, it pulls apart. So then you get information past the dimensional layer, which is made out of that electromagnetic plasma. And then when you quit putting the frequency on it, it vibrates back together, and then it closes. But while it's open, you can get information. So we were doing this energy, raising this energy, and it got to a high frequency. Now, with table tipping, you get the table tipping, a lot of times what will happen is you will have to chase the table around the room, or the table will knock, or the table will rock in a way where you understand it's not normal, or it will thump, or it will levitate in rare circumstances. And because of the frequency and the raw energy of these people who had never opened up before, it was about to levitate. And not because of the spirits, but because of the energy we were raising and creating in a contained sphere. And what happens when the point of the cone that I'm raising and directing up to the top of the sphere, it can't go past the sphere of information or the energy sphere that I created. So what happens after a certain frequency, it has to go somewhere. So if you've ever taken a pair of socks and put two socks together and invert the top of them, roll them down to keep the socks together, that's kind of what happens. The energy gets to a certain pitch and then it rolls and inverts like those socks. And when it does, that top of that, the wide part of the cone that we've raised, the tippy top is up at the top. The wide part of the triangle is on top of the table. So when it starts to invert, it pulls the table up through energy, through physical energy, through metaphysics. Now, I've had a person who goes, I found a cemetery, drew a map for it, 250 graves. They found that graveyard. They didn't want to use the information because it wasn't scientific. But I, as a psychic, drew the map without ever being there, without information of what the place was, what they were, where it was, or any of the buildings, or even the name of the place. And I drew the map. They were able to find it. This guy with sonar came to look for the graves, found the graves, found 250 graves. Didn't want to use that because it's really probably not the reason they did that. They had their own ulterior motives, but they didn't want to use my information because they were like, it's not scientific. It's called metaphysics. So the title is science. It's just the science of the physical, the science of us as people, the untapped science. Because we have all this energy and we just millions of people, trillions of people's energy, and we all have all this DNA of all these thousands of people. And from the dark ages on up, from the dark times, and from the enlightenment that we have, and so it's science. It's just metaphysics, and I call it the physics of Mark. So when I do it, it's my brand of physics. It's my brand of understanding. So we were in the process. Now we have 7 people chanting, table tipping. The table feels like it's on water and it's about to lift. And, which I didn't expect really, because I thought, well, it's going to be, we're going to do a little table tipping but the people were so open to it that boom, it was getting ready to lift, not walk, not jump. It was about to levitate because it's like the air hockey effect. You've got it magnetized. You've got your electromagnetic field around it. You've got basically in a bubble within a bubble, and all of this energy. And they could feel the energy. The ghost hunters could feel the energy. Now, the people doing the table tipping were not worried, not nervous, not scared. They were having a great time. They were trancing. They were into it. They were getting to experience the very primitive energy we all have within us from when our ancestors were around the fires, chanting and chanting and raising energy and doing enactment so that we would have a good hunt, or that the vegetables would grow, or you know, when people were connected to the earth and the universe and understood it, not thought they knew it. They believed it, they understood it, they used it, and they were part of it. And we're part of it. We all have the same energy in us that the blades of grass do. Everything is connected. So the practitioners are having a great time. The ghost hunters are kind of scared, and they don't want to admit that, but they were a little scared, and because they could feel that energy. They hadn't felt that intensity of energy. Well, of course, they had never experienced a spiritualist type energy racing like that. And it was being done in a safe manner. And I was directing the energy. And they had all these tall, they had tables around, they had short battery operated candles, and then they had tall ones. And each individual battery operated candle, there was like 4 or 5 of them at the back of this table. Well, they were all at the height of where the energy was raising from the table. I mean, where the energy was on top of the table, around the table, but it was at a certain level. It was about, chest high. So energy becomes greater by absorbing more energy. So when I'm doing things, I tell people, when I'm doing channeling or we have to raise energy, your cameras are going to go off. The batteries are going to go off. And I can bet you, money on it. The energy will, because the energy picks up the other energy because it's growing. So it's like static electricity. It just picks it up like lint, And so the energy, right when the table was getting ready to lift, those battery operated candles went out like someone blew out real candles. They just all blew off. And Roger went over, flipped them back on after a little while, but they all went out like they were blown out by a breeze. Now, they were not connected to each other. They were individual candles, but it was like, and that got their attention. That freaked them out, and they could feel the intensity of the energy that from the group and from me that we were directing and building and they felt the energy, and I think it freaked people out. Only the ghost hunters. It didn't freak the people who were in it on, because it was so incredible. Because when you get to do these things, it's incredible. It's an amazing feeling. And but the table was getting ready to come up, and that's why the lights went off, because the energy was, starting to turn off. The cameras starting to grab, in a few minutes it would have turned off everything, and because it was building. And then what happens is it reaches a crescendo, it inverts, the table lifts up, and then after a few minutes, when you direct it and turn it down, then the energy will just turn back down. And then you reabsorb the energy that you raised. It has nothing to do with the spirits. The spirits are behind here, talking from a distance. Well, while I'm doing all of this, I'm talking to Eric and talking to the spirits, and he's asking questions. And right about the time the table was about to come up, now the spirits who were in the house there at Night House loved it, because it was I've painted pictures of those spirits. I've given them, been able to show who they look like. and paint them and draw them and then flesh them out, with the new art and everything that's out there, all the tools. I can bring them to life in a way that wasn't available years ago. And because it's one thing when you do a drawing, it's another thing when you can do it almost like photographic. But then people go, oh, yeah, got it. So, but Jack, he was asking questions of Jack. And great. He's this great energy. He lives in the basement. And they have a pool table there. And Jack loves games. He loved marbles. And the first time I talked to Jack, which I was doing all that through Zoom. This was the first time I'd ever met Eric and Roger and any of the ghost hunters that were involved in person. I'd known Eric online for a while and been doing Zoom and doing portraits and doing this, talking to the spirits without knowing anything about the house. I've been proven that. When I say I ain't looked, I ain't looked. And he was talking to Jack and asked a question. He wanted to know Jack's last name. Well, Jack is talking to him, and if you watch the film, you can see that I kind of stop. What happens is Jack had a French last name, which today I went to a doctor who had a very exotic French last name, and it was quite beautiful. But Jack had a very famous French name, and people used to make fun of him for it. Now, Jack, here's a little story on Jack. When I first started encountering and talking to Jack, he's like the spokesperson of the house. And I said, he's showing me these shooter marbles, these big marbles. I said, he loved to play marbles. And I said, we find marbles all the time. And I described a shooter, and they actually have that shooter. So a couple of weeks after that, I'm in Florida. They're in Kentucky. And there's a thrift store I love to go to. And I walked in there. I was drawn in there. Things happen sometimes when you're psychic. You just get drawn to things. And they see something they want. So I went into this thrift store. And I'm standing in a section that I don't normally go to, which was near the children's department. And this voice behind me, this woman's voice, and I'll swear to you, if you've ever listened to Tangia on Poltergeist, the psychic from it, it was that voice. And this woman goes, do you like marbles? And I thought, oh, I should be wearing a diaper, because that shocked me. And I was like, why, yes, I do like marbles. And because I had been talking to Jack about marbles. Turn around, and it was this lady she had to be about 4 feet tall. And I'd done a reading for her before, but I don't think she remembered me. But she had this beehive, like a runette beehive, and long hair below it. And she goes, I like marbles, but I don't know nothing about them, but I just priced them. They said they're worth a lot of money, but do you like marbles? And I said, yes, I do. And so I went over, and there's this bag of marbles with a lot of shooters in it, like 3 beautiful shooters in it, and old-timey marbles. And I only had like $6, and they were like $5. So I got them, and I sent them. I bought them. I said, Jack wanted marbles. So I had done a portrait of another ghost or spirit there that I was going to send to Eric in the night house. And so I packaged up the painting, and I put the marbles in, and I sent them, and they have them in a bowl at the house. And it's that he loves shooters. But back to the story. Eric was asking questions of Jack, and he wanted to know Jack's last name. Well, Jack didn't want me blaring this last name, his French last name, out loud. So when he asked Jack's last name, you can see I kind of stopped because Jack was behind here talking to me. Now, he had no idea that they were having such a good time, the spirits were, because there was so much energy and they were having a great time. And he thought that Eric could understand me or hear him like I do. So he goes over to Eric, and I saw Eric's collar go like this. Okay, it went out like this, and he's a little shorter than Eric, and he had pulled his collar and was going to tell Eric personally the name. Now on the video, you can hear you can hear Jack's voice, a man's voice, telling him whatever his name was. And it's right when all the candles went out, and they were trying to figure that out, and it was intense. And then all of a sudden, the shirt pulled, and he thought it was the spirit trying to pull him out of the room. They've convinced themselves, it's the spirit's trying to pull him out of whatever this was. It wasn't. It was the spirit pulling on the collar to tell him the name so it wouldn't be blared out. It wasn't trying to pull him out of the room. The spirits were enjoying the thing. But all of the ghost hunters, I have to say, all the ghost hunters were freaked. And they haven't talked to me about what happened. They didn't ask me what happened. I think they just freaked out over it. And which is okay. I mean, if you want to know what it was, you can always talk to me, kind of thing, because I'll explain it. But it wasn't anything bad. The spirits weren't having a weird out thing because of what was happening. They were having a great time. Actually, the next weekend, they had a great time with the ghost hunts. And it sounded like people, the spirits were jiving because they had energy to last for another week. Because it took me, even when I quit channeling, it took me a week to quit channeling because it was so intense. But when the intensity happened and they all went, I turned it down. And you can hear me I'll say, I'm turning the energy down, we're down, and I directed it and I turned it off because I know how to do it. So the table tipping was, the people who were in it loved it. The ghost hunters didn't know what to think about it, and I think the shock of it, which that's fine, be shocked, but to me, it's like, I can show, I'm I try to be a nice person. I try to be fun and silly, and I am fun and silly. And people don't know that I can pull some rabbits out of my wazoo like that. And, but it's energy. It's not a bad thing. It's, like I said, you can do the table tipping without doing the spirit talking because it's energy. It is physics. So, at some point, I hope they get to where they're not afraid of it and or afraid of me, and understand that it was physics. But they're looking at a metaphysician. I'm an energy technician. And what happened was not something really scary. It was just intense. And they had never felt intense energy like that. And probably won't again, because it was the combination of people who were not afraid who were doing it. And also, it was being directed. And it was intense. It was great. And if we had not stopped when we stopped, the table would have been about a foot off the ground. And there were photographs of that happening in the 1800s. But it's all due to physics. And so, see, to me, it's like dealing with ghost hunting and paranormal groups and things like that. To me, it's like if you're in it, let's experiment. Let's reach into that bag of techniques and experiment. So, and I find people aren't interested in that. They want to do what is typical, which is listen to the spare boxes. I watch lots of people run when they really have an experience, which I'm not one to run. I'm one to go, oh, it's starting to happen. Let's watch and see what happens. And I understand people getting shocked because if you haven't ever seen something before, of course it's shocking. And the people that were there I really like. And, but I understand it's shocking. So, but they need to get over the shock and understand, well, it's not something that takes away from what they're doing. They were able to prove evidence I was talking about during the spiritualist part. It enhances what you have. But I've had quite a few incidences of working with different groups, and it's they want to do it, but it scares them. So, and I understand it because if it's new, but it's really not new. This is old. This is as old as humanity. This people were doing energy raising before they had language. They knew, uh, uh, we're going to do this. They knew how to communicate through body language, through drawing, through um, almost telepathy. Before there was language, there was communication. There's always been communication of some sort. And a lot of it was nonverbal. But when people understood, if we don't get deer this year, we're going to starve to death this winter. So somebody dressed up as a deer, and other people hunted them around the fire to show the earth what they needed to bring in. And they raised energy to give to earth so that the earth could, because you have to give to get. And um and in extremes, they would give people or animals, for to but you to get energy, you give energy. You begin a symbiotic relationship. So energy that they saw from me, they didn't know how to explain. So, but what I find out with people is they don't know how to, if I don't understand it, instead of going, hey, you know, it scares them a little bit. And they ain't going to admit that they were scared. That's okay. But what I'm going to be doing in the future is I'm going to be doing my own investigations. I'm going to go, I've got some place very big that I want to go in May of next year. I'm going to be very excited. And I'm going to take small groups of people who are just, that I know I can trust to work with and to be open, and that also will know how to protect themselves and also know how to take direction, and he'll just jump in. And because I feel like with the new skills I have, because of the things that have happened to me in the last few years, my skill level is upper. But, psychics like that, when you're like that, I'm already disabled. So we have a short shelf. So if we're going to do, and while we're hot, we got to do it before, the body runs out or time runs out. And so I'm going to do the old spiritual stuff and have people film it, and we'll do table tippings and spiritualist techniques, and like I said, I've got several places, so it's going to be really old school. I'm going to take it back to the 1890s almost in a way that I should. But of course, then we have people who will be filming and people who will be there. And it's okay to be nervous. It's okay to be scared during things that you're not used to. But the way that I think, I make sure it's so protected by the or you're wearing all the protection you need. Nothing's going to happen to you. And if everyone is working in sync and learning how to use their energy, then we reach inside, because you have all of this energy and knowledge that's inside of you, all the DNA in you, the DNA memory from the hundreds of thousands of people that make you. You don't only have their hair color, skin color, you have their memories and the little curls of the brain, the little gray matter up here. You see the little curls. The scientists are proving the DNA memory is in there. So whoever DNA you have their memories up until the point they put their energy into your gene pool. So we have all of that. We have the memories and lives of all those people, besides anything else. And it's all in your brain, it's all in your memories, in your cerebellum. It's all in your pineal gland. It's all accessed by your pineal gland. And so I'm going to open up and dig into that old spiritual self of mine that I have, and I'm going to show people how, because when I talk to spirits, I talk to spirits in an ethical manner. I'm not looking at them as entertainment. I'm looking at them as, some of them are people. Now, there are energies out there that are not what we understand as people. And we have to also know how to deal with those. And it's something that's a whole different kettle of fish. Just being psychic doesn't mean you can deal with those energies. And you also have to have the training, which the metaphysical training I had, were the tools of the trade, how to deal things in a grounded way that, if you need to put a stop to something, you can put a stop to something. If you need to open the veil, I know how to open the veil. I created a veil splitter where the frequency, when you apply it to the material of the veil opens. You quit vibrating on it closes. I know how to do that. And a lot of people haven't seen what the material, the dimensional walls look like. We have, dimensions are like tree rings. They're created in the earth. And so you have, every year is basically a hallway of space, a dimensional wall. And they're big and they're in layers. And because it's plasma, we walk through them all the time. So there's information inside of each of those dimensional halls. And when you pass through a dimensional wall, you're picking up and experiencing stuff that you don't even know what you're experiencing. You're just going through that information. Some of it's static information and some of it's other stuff. But we pass through dimensional walls all the time because each year there's two times of the year: May 1st, November 1st. The veil at May 1st, because of the poles, the electromagnetic bands of basically the Earth aura, because it has an aura, because the Earth is a sphere with a hot center and an atmosphere. So from the south, it's shooting energy out through the poles, through the equator, through the pores of the earth, through the crust. So it makes its own aura, and each year, because of whatever it is, the turn of the seasons, or just certain ways that the earth turns in orbit, the energy, the magnetic of the aura of the because of whatever it is happening at May 1st. And it stretches that material. The veil kind of separates, and then you get information. And then because it's electromagnetic plasma, when it's warm, it's like jello. If you put jello in a bowl and it gets warm, it melts. It becomes fluid. If you put it in the cold, it turns into jello. It gels up. So when the earth is going through a warm expansion, the electromagnetic bands that are being created that year in May, it stretches and it opens, information comes out, and spirit activity is easier during May 1st and up until November 1st. Then after November, it begins to get cold. So what happens is the bands begin to contract and the veils close. So if you understand that, and in the old days, they understood it. They used it. They didn't think it worked. They did it. So as modern technicians and metaphysicians and metaphysical people, if you understand the right times to communicate, then you can communicate, you can do things. So it's better to do things like the table tippings and all that while the plasma of the dimensional walls is fluid, is open, but the veil tears and the veil closes all the time. We pass through dimensional walls all the time. Now the difference is, because of all the things that have happened to me, I have been in a place where you could see a dimensional wall, and you could see the material, and it looks like gray. If you know what marmalade looks like, it looks like gray marmalade with little scratches in it. It's this material, and it's if you put the frequency on it, it will separate, but it looks like kind of a gray jello. And that's because everything has a little bit of dark matter, dark energy. The reason that if you're in a place and you see shadow people, or certain things that are from a deeper level, sometimes they're just black like onyx. Well, they're made out of dark matter, and they'll show up. You can have the dark in the world, and that black figure will stand out. Uh, they just look like onyx, but they come from a level of dark matter. And there's dark matter in different layers of the earth and on the outside of the aura of the earth. So you have dark matter outside and dark matter inside. And then when people do rituals, sometimes they pull up that information. And a lot of it's like oil sometimes, and they'll take it and they'll embed it with thoughts and consciousness, and they'll use their own thoughts and consciousness to give it thoughts and consciousness. And I knew uh, scientist person who kind of did that. We went to a place and they were experimenting, but they did what in magic you would call making a thought form, which I don't agree with. I don't agree to do that because you're giving thought and life to something that may not need to have life. And then when you let it out, if it doesn't know how to eat, it's going to find a way to eat. If it does figure out how to eat, it can sustain itself. But it's not human, but it has consciousness because you put thought into it. And I went to a place and they did that, and they were trying to seed the place with this good. It was meant to be a thought form of a specific a person, a little girl, but it really wasn't a little girl. But when I saw it, thought people don't understand. Your thoughts have life, and they can give life, and they can give life to things sometimes that you don't need to be given life to. So it's not. You got to be careful about playing God, but he gave life to this to do an experiment to see if he planted these thought forms and a psychic picks it up, then that went off because I'm talking about this. But and it was weird. And then later on, when I looked at it, I went, "Oh, that was a thought form," because I had been expecting a real spirit, but it was real strange. And later on, I went, "Oh, that was a created thing." But then he created an a form. That information was a damaged child. And then after their experiment, they just walk off. And so you have to understand, that's not a cool thing to do. But as a psychic, I go in, I try to be as open. I don't let people who don't like me or give me a bad time or whatever, I don't let them spoil whatever for me. I'm not going to get jaded, and I'm always going to try to approach everything with openness and experimental kind of stuff. But I'm also getting where I'm old and I'm getting tired of bull. So there ain't no more bull to be taken. So if people don't like me, don't approach me. And if you approach me and I do what you ask me to do, let that you know instead of it being a hindrance, let it open your mind. Let's do experiments. Let's do things. Because I'm proving a lot of stuff right now. When I put out my evidence, I can. I've got the receipts. I can prove things I'm doing, but I can't take credit for having the ability to do it. But what I can take credit for is using my talents and the energy I've been given to get a result so I can get results. And that's what people want. And I'm like, I want people to be open. So the reason I'm going to be doing my own stuff is to start teaching people about energy and about what I do. And that for psychics, if you want to do this kind of thing, and people who do the spiritualist stuff, you can do it and do it safely. When you go to investigations, to not bring bottles of beer or drink or do drugs or tell jokes or anything, because everything you're putting into your aura. And if you're there to talk to spirits, you're also telling them things through drinking and sexual talk that you need to, you may not be needing to have, because you might get a boyfriend or girlfriend you don't really want. And which I have seen happen with people. So I know it's the truth. So, and it's not I'm bashing people. It's it's a learning thing. But when I do my things, which will be the fat psychic goes to Waverly, or the fat psychic goes to, Winchester, or, you know, things like that. Um, there are going to be things. You do not drink. You do not do sexual jokes. You're going to, if you're going to sit at the table, you're going to do your protection. You're going to learn how to control your energy. You're going to learn how to respect the spirits. You're going to learn how to respect yourself. And when you talk to spirits, some of them, for the ones that are conscious people, you don't want to approach them and be ugly with them. You want to have an open dialogue. And if it's something you really have to hold at arm's length that ain't quite human, then you can do that, but you also have to be wise about it. So I don't do these things willy nilly. I will be doing things in the old school manner. I will be showing people stuff I haven't seen in a long time, or it's so old that it's new, because people haven't seen this. And but it's in my wheel, so I'm going to do that. And there are plenty of people out there I really like and care for and would love to work with. I just need to set boundaries now, because they get what they want. So I'm going to get what I want, which is I want a good product. I want to be able to work on cold cases. I want to be able to show people that I can do what I say I can do. And I can do that. And if you are psychic, do that. Do that. Walk your talk, walk your path, know what you're doing. And if you don't know, it's not a thing. Don't ever go into something that you don't know what to do and act like you do know what you're doing. If you don't know, the best thing is not to do it, or to not do it just because well, all these people came and you got to know when to say, no, I'll shift gears and do a little something different. But you got to be ethical. You got to be smart. You got to be disciplined. And like I said, I'm not bashing people for doing things like that. I mean, I'm fine with people partying after, but not partying before or during, because you never know in these metaphysical, paranormal sites. You don't know what other things have been dropped or called, or that are living off the decomposition, or that are living off of the attention, or have been dropped or been from somewhere else. So you have to be wise, and, and you can have fun, but to me, having fun is exploration, and finding out and really getting good communication. Now, hopefully some people will enjoy the show and got something out of it. And my whole point was I'm covering what I'm doing and how I'm doing. I'm about to go forward into investigations. I think that will be pretty big next year. So, but I'm going to do it old school. The only thing modern will be the cameras and the way that I deal with certain issues. But I'm also training people how to do it. And so that when you go into it, you're a little bit more prepared, and that you are, don't approach something afraid. If you're afraid, you can be a little scared, but make sure your protective system is up. And if you're with a group of people, one time there was a rich group I knew, and they were in New York. And this girl decided to call Kali, which is, kind of the destroyer. And she was calling Kali down into the circle for whatever reason. They said it's a good thing she didn't know what she was doing. And because it didn't happen. And I've known of people who've done things tongue in cheek and making fun of, or deliberately trying to piss off energies that they better not. Because grown men who thought they were just brave, 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 and then they were scared to pieces when something came that they had antagonized. So be ethical, be smart, be disciplined, come up with a plan. And if something you have to be in control of the energy so you can turn it down if it's not working. So now we're coming to the end of our show. And I want to thank Carl and I want to thank Kat for having me on. I hope that this has been informative. I've had so much fun doing the table tippings. I can't wait to do more of it. And I hope that it opens up a little bit. Maybe you can understand a little bit more about it. Understand modern ghost hunters. They want to do things, but they're scared of some of this stuff. And it's not the stuff they should be scared of. They should be ready for exploration. And I think because if you're in it to really learn or to get proof, this is what you do with people like me. And if you want to go further, then you can. If not, then, stick to the squawk boxes. That's fine because they work too. And it's not for everybody. So now I'm going to tell you how, if you ever want to contact me, I have an email address, but I'm old and I don't check it as good as I should. So, because everything is picking up, so the best way to contact me is Mark Elliott, ELLIOTTFULTS on Facebook. Don't send the friend requests because I get all these weird friend requests right now from women with big boobs from Siberia and stuff going, "You're awful cute." And also people who trying to hack, and do things. So, but just message me directly. Just message me, and then tell me, in the subject matter, what you're asking. If you're curious, what you want to know, back when I can. And I also do readings. I do Zoom ghost investigations with people. If I get along with the person, I'm pretty well open to do Zoom ghost investigations. That's how I did all this stuff going into last year. So the way I found the 250 graves was through a Zoom ghost hunt. And I've done a lot through Zoom because I'm really good at remote viewing. And so I am open to that. I'm open to doing being available for people for their to do Zoom ghost hunting, investigating. But I always tell people, don't tell me anything beforehand. Just tell me what you want me to do an investigation. And if I agree to it, if it feels good to me and I do it, then I'll do it. But the thing I ask is don't tell me anything. Don't tell me about the place. Just say this is the time. We'll hook you up, and then I'll tell you what I've picked up. Give me a week ahead of time's notice, and if I can do it, or give me enough time to get myself together. So if you want to contact me, Mark Elliott, ELLIOTTFULTS on Facebook, and you'll be seeing me around, and we are going to say, I guess tonight we're finished with the show. I want to thank you all for listening. And thank you for coming to Paranormal Experience. And I hope that your life blossoms and blooms in the bestest way. And I hope that we all get through all the hard times. And if you have conflict with people, always you can always say I'm sorry, and they can always say they're sorry, and you can always move forward and always be open to be kind to each other and be kind to the spirits and be kind to yourself. So I guess for tonight that we are finished. So good night, good people, and we'll be seeing you very soon on YouTube and hopefully in real life. So I hope that you have a good evening. Good night.